a lot for the introduction, and we're very glad that we can be here today and give you a bit of an insight at how we work at GovStack. And I'm especially pleased today that I am not alone here introducing what we do at GovStack, but as we rely on the technical community that we work with at GovStack, we have a representative of the technical community here today, our cloud infrastructure working group lead, Karsten.
I'm not the lead. I'm part of that.
Strong voice in the infrastructure working group. Yeah, we'll give you an insight in how we support countries in digitizing services today. And I'm Nora. I work with GIZ on the side on GovStack. So it's a collaboration of many organizations, and I work with GIZ. And we'll guide you through how GovStack works today. And we'll have a very special insight into one of the building block working groups, the Cloud Infrastructure Working Group, and that will be Karsten.
Yeah, I'm Karsten. I'm basically a founder and the driving force behind Vanilla Core, which is a company focusing and specializing into cloud-native infrastructures, Kubernetes, OpenStack, and everything around that, here in Germany, as well as in Europe, as well as across the world.
All right, we'll hear more from Karsten later. I'll start by giving you an insight of what GovStack is. So what we realized 5 years ago is that all countries around the world are currently digitizing their services, so the way how they interact with their citizens. And that is kind of a process that how the governments interact with all of us throughout our lifespan. So that is digital services around birth, like birth certificates, services around youth, like the first driver's license. Adulthood is where services like unemployment benefits or marriage certificates may hit us. And at the senior level, we can think of retirement benefits and things like that. So throughout the lifespan, we interact with our governments, and that becomes more and more digital. And that's happening around the world. So not only in Germany or France, as we've just heard the example down there, but also around the world. And what we realized as a few organizations coming together is that all governments around the world are facing the same challenges. They all want interoperable services. They want services that are close to the citizens, etc. I'll go down through that list in a second. But what we realized is that we do not have to leave countries alone in digitizing their services. And not every country has to come up with a new way of digitizing their services. But we can all learn from best practices and knowledge sharing and experiences that some countries made and bring that together. So when I talk about we or GovStack, that's mainly these 4 organizations or ministries. So the BMZ on the German side, Estonia, the Digital Impact Alliance as a UN foundation, and ITU as the UN organization for digital infrastructure development. And we came together with one vision. We said all citizens around the world should have access to government services. And how do we want to support countries in bringing service to their citizens is by building a global toolbox for e-government services. And we realized along the lifespan, all of the services that governments offer to their citizens are built around different modules. So they all consist of the same technological elements, like independent of the birth certificate or the driver's license. We need an identity. We need to access registries. We need possibly a payment function, and everything needs to be hosted somewhere in a cloud infrastructure. And there's many more of those elements that we can define beforehand and then stack into different services together. And we realized all countries can access and make use of the same digital elements. So one payment building block can be used across sectors and across countries. So why not defining it once, and then all countries can use this building block to build interoperable services based on reusable modules. So we said, let's bring the tech experts of the world together and define all of these different digital elements. So what we did is we came up with 15, or in the start it was 7 working groups, and to define the most critical elements of all digital services. And building blocks are reusable software components that can be open source or commercial off the shelf, and they facilitate generic services. And as the founders of GovStack, we're obviously not the ones holding all of the tech expertise, but we brought together individuals from private sector and open source communities. You can see some of them here on the right side, with organizations, so also individuals designing the digital, they all coming together in different working groups to write technical specifications, so that describe how each building block should look like once, and this can then be taken by countries and adapt to their local needs. These are the building blocks that we have come up with so far. They're always developed in different waves. The first 3 ones that you can see here are completed. They're available on Gitbook and can be accessed by countries, and already are. And we're currently working on wallet and cloud hosting. Well, I think cloud hosting is actually now finalized as well. We'll hear more about that.
Since last year.
We'll hear more about that. And there's new waves now being started, because we all know there's technical elements. There's a lot of them that still need to be designed. These are the countries that are currently making use of the GovStack building blocks in digitizing their services. And that happens through one of the partners, GIZ, ITU, Estonia, being in touch with one of those countries, and then bringing in the technical community. They are introducing them to the technical building blocks, the specifications. Everyone can access them on Gitbook. And then, if needed, countries either build the digital services on their own, or they are supported by service providers or experts that support countries in this. Karsten will also give us an insight into how that really looks like in practice. So GovStack is really kind of this middle woman between governments and local and global software providers. So we're kind of bridging the gap that sometimes is still there when governments are, we talked about it earlier, but it's like, open source and all of these services, isn't it easier for me to just go with this one service, this one provider has a big name, and I can just let them digitize everything we do? And then we come in and say, well, your value is sovereignty. And that's what we all hear from all governments around the world. That's not only Europe. All governments around the world come to us and say, well, we want a sovereign state. We want to build our own services. We want to keep control over what's happening in our country. And then we bring in the local or global software providers and service providers to support on the ground. We have a marketplace where all of the software that is tested GovStack compliant, so the software from around the world, from open source communities or commercial off the shelf, can test their software if it's compliant, because then it's easier for governments to bring in this software into their digital systems. That's how the marketplace looks like. And these are a few examples of software providers that have tested their software against the different building blocks. But I'll jump over this because I feel like Karsten has so much to tell us. And that's the cloud infrastructure building block that we're focusing on today.
That's an awesome animation. With
sovereign tech cloud stack, a small one. And I'm really happy that one of the 15 working groups that we have developed so far is based here in Germany, or a part of the working group, and can give us an insight into how it looks like to really work with countries and develop one of those technical specifications to then bring it back to countries to make use of it.
Gustav, I'm just looking at the watch because we are very limited with regards to time, but that was exactly 10 minutes. I'm impressed. Now I only can screw it up. I apologize for that upfront. My company is Vanilla Core, but I spare you all of that. Look it up, at least on LinkedIn. You should find us. We have a website, but I was too stupid to bring it in here, so I apologize for that again. But I don't want to bore you with that. What we did basically with the cloud infrastructure building block is that we implemented, and that's very typical for all of the building blocks, that we basically implemented a cloud, a community-driven approach, meaning it was basically initiated by GovStack, but then it was run and basically completed by interested countries. The cloud infrastructure building block basically was defined between September 2023 and end of August 2024. It's now final. Overall, 16 meetings happened. We had 8 participants from 6 nations regularly contributing, plus volunteers which joined in when that was required. It took roughly 5 rounds until finalization. The community was already involved there, and it's already in use for certain dev and test environments, and that's basically where I'm nowadays basically coming in. The reason why we have that, and that was already mentioned by Nora, is we got to have some underpinning for all of these services. These services can be of completely different kinds, of completely different natures, but all they have in common is that they need to run on some sort of reliable, scalable, and capable infrastructure. Ideally, infrastructure which is adoptable and is future-proven and does not necessarily need to be constantly paid for, meaning ideally we are able to run these things on on-premises, private cloud environments rather than paying for hyperscalers, which are probably not even within the countries located, which is for many of the countries, and you have seen the map a little bit, specifically when you go down a little bit towards Africa, towards the Caribbean, but also specifically Ukraine. We just recently had a discussion with them. For them, it is basically a no-go to give up their digital sovereignty. But it's obviously a mindset, it's a process. GovStack already emphasizes upon that, but also with the cloud infrastructure building block, the idea is to emphasize upon that, to make sure that the organizations and countries rolling it out are able to actually do that themselves. So the cloud infrastructure building block is basically what is, first of all, it's a specification. It's not so much an actual product, but I come to that in a second. But it's a specification which is open, which is expandable, and you can basically roll it out and set it up without being tied to a certain product. Vendor agnosticity is a very important aspect in there. And it's set up in a way and meant in a way that's basically open for current and future technologies, for example, AI and stuff like that, which is more and more becoming a very interesting thing. The GovStack Cloud Infrastructure Building Block has a blueprint implementation, which is Sovereign Cloud Stack, which is another project which was run here in Germany, which is still run. The official public funding has run out end of last year, but the project is still continuing under the roof of Open Source Business Alliance and as a dedicated project. And we use Sovereign Cloud Stack as a reference implementation for what we do there. Sovereign Cloud Stack and the building blocks are pretty similar. It's not just because we were involved in the building block, but it's basically because that's best practices. That's a healthy kind of thinking rather than just tying oneself to certain providers. So what we have in there is basically, very importantly for countries implementing that, it is supposed to run off commodity hardware. Very important, because if you don't do that, you already pay a lot for the hardware. You can theoretically run something like Sovereign Cloud Stack or the Cloud Infrastructure Building Block of Raspberry Pis, if you have enough of them. You probably need a lot, but you can do that if you want to. I would not recommend it, no, though. And then it basically defines an infrastructure as a services layer, which is very important for running virtual machines, for having software-defined network, compute and storage. And then on top of that, the infrastructure building block defines that container orchestrators, for example, Kubernetes, should be running, because also as a best practice, the different kinds of workloads defined within the GovStack environment and then basically implemented by vendors should run as lightweight as possible on a technical level, which is basically as best described as a container, which is lightweight, which can run everywhere where you have such a container cluster, and then you can basically roll out your GovStack. And even if you have legacy stuff, you can still run that on the virtualization layer, which is fine. But also, the thing should be future-proven. So it was very important to include 2 more aspects in there. One is basically operation tools. We don't want to have the countries rolling it out and then basically within a week being confronted with an environment which is not working anymore, because the insights are missing. So open telemetry, open data, open governance, open operations. These are all aspects that basically are part of the operation toolchain. first of all, defined as concepts, and then on the level of sovereign cloud stack, already implemented using certain tools. And then on the other hand, Nora already mentioned that identity and access management federation, which needs to be provided not just to the infrastructure, but also to the GovStack layer, or vice versa, depending on from where you look at it. So it's a very comprehensive offering. And what we basically do is, instead of just telling them, use sovereign cloud stack, I mean, we do that, but we explain it. And we give basically an open choice there. We basically conduct trainings and workshops. So what we basically do there is we explain them the concepts, interested countries. Like, for example, Eswatini, Kenya, Somalia, Djibouti, all of those trainings happened within the past 2-3 months. That's just what happens now, and there will be more up down the road. We explain basically to them like the infrastructural components behind that, the infrastructural concepts behind that, cloud nativeness, what is cloud, how is infrastructure as a service working, how could it be rolled out in their own country, on their own hardware, in their own data centers. So it's basically, first of all, an explanation of what is happening, but then secondly also like making clear that is actually something which gives them a lot of advantages. If they do that, they leapfrog their development. Independent of which GovStack workloads they run, that kind of underpinning gives them something which is perfectly suitable for GovStack, but also reusable across other domains and other environments as well. So we give that knowledge, we share that knowledge in very intensive workshops. And the interesting thing is, first of all, it's typically like already and always for us as well, some sort of getting rid of our own prejudices and getting rid of our own kind of perceptions, because we are typically confronted, in quotation marks, with very, very intensive and lively discussions and participations there. So very, very open, very, very frank. There's even the desire, which was expressed multiple times, to get rid of things like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace by using the underpinnings. That's currently not part of GovStack, but that kind of mindset, what you can do with GovStack, what you can do with the Cloud Foundation building block, is actually applicable to that as well. And there's other great open source projects, for example, OpenDesk, for example, which could basically make up for that. Also, the avoidance of vendor locks and stuff like that is very important. I have 1 more minute, or basically 2, but it's fine. It's very important to the participants. And very importantly, we do have a joint feeling that all of that has to be based upon open source. I am a very, very strong open source proponent for years, 15, 20 years. We discussed upfront that I'm using certain Linux distributions and what have you on my daily driver, stuff like that. The point being is, here in Western countries, we are typically confronted with that, like, yeah, you can do open source, but the risks and what could go wrong. There, for example, in Africa, that is the sheer necessity. They understand open source completely different. That's part of their enablement. That's part of their leapfrogging things forward. And it has a completely different meaning to them. And it's very interesting to see that, very interesting also in contributing to that. But on the other hand, we also need to establish the kind of community thinking then. Like, when you do some things, you got to like contribute back. That's, I mean, with every kind of governmental organization, you typically have something like your silo kind of thinking. That is also very prevalent there. But we are working on that. So that is very, very interesting. And also, and that is where I basically end the conversation, you see a picture which was taken in Djibouti, one of the poorest countries in Africa. But we had such an awesome panel there, so many interested participants. And when you just count it, okay, it's not 50-50, but at least it's quite diverse. With me, the middle-aged white male there, but a lot of young people there, a lot of women. And actually, the women were basically driving the thing forward. They were like, whoa. They asked the questions where I was like, let's discuss that in detail. So that was very interesting to see, but that is also a common theme which I see across all of these countries. Also the kind of diversity. The previous talk was about diversity. That is lived there. Also like taking away parts of the prejudices and the pictures that we have in mind, it's quite interesting. So community is very diverse. And Deborah, I give back to Nora.
Thanks, Karsten.
You're welcome.
I basically want to lead into a Q&A or conversation with you, because as Karsten said, and I'm really glad that you are here as someone who has seen how GovStack is implemented in different countries. I also wanted to bring that, or I'm happy that you brought that spirit into the room, because we see there's a lot of we have, I'm really glad that now we have those conversations about sharing experiences within Europe. We just heard a talk between Germany and France, how that is working well. And we see that there's so much interest around the world to have a bit of a more global exchange. And I think there's so many countries we can learn from, but also where we as the European open source community can have an exchange and can add value with all of the experiences that have been made in the past in this community. And so I just want to also let you know that all of the working groups are open. GovStack is really open to all contributors from both private sector or individuals from different organizations. And we're very happy that we're currently receiving a lot of requests for software that is aiming to become or to test if they're GovStack compliant, because we see that is a growing interest of software being applied in different countries. And so that's really also what I was hoping to hear from the room and the community here at FOSS, if there is applicability, if there is interest in becoming a more global, even more global community, including not only Europe and Northern America, but also countries in the Southern Hemisphere, because we see there's a lot of interest, and I hope that the exchange will grow. But with that, I'll open it up to questions that might be here, or just something you're interested in, or you felt like that might be worth discussing even more.
I'm afraid you might take it as a nasty question, but I can't refrain. What about Germany?
Sorry.
No, I love the question. Thanks a lot.
You reacted way more professional than me.
I'm prepared, I guess. That question, we've heard that question before. And for a long time, we were always saying, well, this was an international project. As GIZ, we don't have the mandate. That's kind of the German hat that we're wearing. But we're bringing the technical expertise from Germany into the conversation. But recently, I'm really happy that we have a very strong interaction and exchange with a lot of the German open source ecosystem in a working group with Sendis, the Sovereign Tech Agency, and others, to also figure out how can we bring this together and share the both kind of what we already did is we bring expertise from here into the project, but the other way around is there international expertise or experiences that we can also benefit from here in Germany. And we are in the process of making all of the specifications available on open code, so that will bring it more to the German system. And so, taking those steps, and we're getting more and more excitement, I'd say, in Germany currently, which is really nice to see.
And probably to add that, also like on the infrastructure level, we currently see that a lot with what is happening in the United States. That raises a lot of questions of how things are run in Europe, and frankly, that the public hand is very much dependent on that. That kind of perception is changing now. I personally think way too late, but whatever, we can still catch that and work with that. Basically, what we see currently is a strong push probably not driven by open source, probably not driven by community, but first of all by avoidance of vendor lock. And that is then basically where GovStack then again can provide approaches and best practices and building blocks, and where also like German-specific solutions can be established. And again, like on the cloud infrastructure building block, we are basically, that's completely agnostic to where it runs. Basically, we see that as some sort of an enablement program for the regions, for the countries, for the states implementing that. And that is strongly needed in Europe because we lost all of that over the past years.
I do agree with that. I'm Polish, and we have a Polish presidency right now. The most important thing for the Polish presidency in EU is the digital sovereignty.
Yeah.
It's like the biggest thing ever. Yeah. We have an event about that, of a Capital Series event in June in Poland. We'll be discussing this, and
very important
to get all the states together, to work together.
Even though there's a lot of questions still how to do that, but what we need to avoid is basically getting trapped in fear. These are opportunities. These are really like solvable challenges and actually ways forward to actually establish a truly European kind of approach to things. That is
fully agree.
Pretty interesting.
Hello, thank you for your passion.
I apologize for that.
I think that is really needed to do this job with passion. I'm a trainer on cloud native space, and I think I train a lot of government IT people for the last 20 years or so. But currently we must have pressure on this topic. The cloud native stack is really heavy, and we need to train them. And I think we must start an initiative to come together on quarter basis or so on conferences to solve the problems, to come in contact with the private industry, with experts, with the open source communities, and with the governments. I see the initiative is not there, but I think we must start that with passion. Thank you for that.
In fact, just to add to that, there is actually a lot of initiative going on. It's a little bit like behind the curtain, as it is very often with public hand-driven projects. But I totally agree. We got to get it started. Passion is one thing. The other thing is obviously education, making clear that open source, for example, on which level ever, is not a thing where we would basically say we outsource any responsibility. We are part of the responsibility, but we are not helpless. We have the biggest communities in the world, and they basically work hand in hand with us. And that is something, one of the biggest challenges that we see with adoption of things like GovStack, for example, and also the underpinnings of that is always like the kind of fear that one would be left alone. But the thing is, with open source, with these open source approaches, you are not left alone, not even remotely. The community is there, and it is there free of charge. I mean, it would be grateful if you would contribute back financially as well as with knowledge. But the point is that there's a very, very wrong perception about cloud native, about open source, about community-driven approaches, and I intentionally put them together. But that perception is currently starting to change, but it's still a very long way forward.
What I mean is start a meetup in any city and any location on monthly basis to come in contact and really implement that. Don't specify that, implement that. Yeah. That is really, really important. Don't say, okay, we specify, we document things. No, now we need the solutions. And the solutions exist.
They are there.
They're not really available for the right people. That is the problem.
The complexity is still there. We also need to address that. So yeah, absolutely. But that's done through education.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.